have the record? Oh, there you go. Perfect, thanks. Okay, it is 4:02. We'll call this meeting to order April 12th. Can I get a roll call of Planning Commission members present, please? Or actually, I'm sorry, I need to do a roll call. I forget this whole Zoom thing. Heather Lind is here. Howard Tritz.
Here.
Steve Boyle.
Steve Boyle here.
Abby Dahlman.
Here.
Bryce Ehrlich.
Here.
Aaron Palin.
Here.
And Lupe Bobadilla, did you make it? I didn't see him. I know that he was not sure he was going to make it tonight. And county commissioners, do we have Commissioner Munch?
Here.
Commissioner Marcella?
Present.
And Commissioner Fiedler? Okay. Do we have any changes or additions to the agenda? Okay. Any staff updates, Anne?
Sure. I think you all received the 2 pending applications that we've just noticed. We have a right-of-way vacation coming for May 24th, as well as a conditional use permit for a training facility for the Leadville Lake County Fire Rescue on May 24th as well. We have the flurry of applications are starting. Paul and I both have received some applications that are in review right now. We have a minor subdivision, site plan, CUP, and another CUP that are all currently in review, and several in the wings. So is going to start to get to be that time of year where we're going to see a lot more applications. So just give you a heads up that it looks like it's going to be a very busy summer.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I know it seems like it's picking up that way. And we did have, I know that there was a couple of questions. We have the, we had a couple of our planning commission members seats vacate earlier this year, and I don't actually know what their necessarily expiration dates were for those vacancies. And I know it was Commission Member Boyle and Commission Member Bobadilla that had those vacancies. And I think there's been a couple of other, those needed to be advertised as well. And there's been a couple of other inquiries on those. And so I know that the commissioners wanted to give us a quick update or quick discussion on that real quick to make sure everybody's kind of on the same page. So I don't know if one of our commissioners wants to talk to that.
Yeah, and Heather, I think you did a fine job. I didn't know if you wanted to have any greater discussion on that, other than I feel like it keeps getting lost in the shuffle, and clearly there was a bit of confusion that was realized a couple of weeks ago when we were sharing the letters of interest back and forth. So I think I just wanted to be sure that everyone knew there were 2 vacancies and that we had posted the opportunity and gotten some letters of interest. So if you all want to schedule conversations around reviewing those and giving recommendations to the board for appointment, that would be great. I think we have four letters.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken.
Those are the current.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, I would urge that we do that really very quickly. And I don't know if the Planning Commission wants to just all get together here and maybe a special meeting one night. That's not going to take very long to review those and come up with a recommendation to the commissioners, just because I'm a little unclear as to whether or not there is a process issue. If we have currently expired board members or commission members still actively participating, and so I don't really know what that issue could be or is, but I think we probably need to get this sorted here fairly quickly. I think, you know, to backtrack just a little bit, I think most of the Planning Commission thought that the existings were already reinstated. So I don't think we knew that this was kind of something to be put on the plate, which hence the miscommunication. But now that we're all on the same page, I think we can kind of put it to the front burner. So I don't know if anybody on the Planning Commission has any thoughts on availability and or willingness to meet outside of normal business or normal meeting times to try to get this sorted quickly. That would be awesome.
I think you're correct, and we should do it as soon as possible. Myself, I'm available almost all the time.
Okay, how does Planning Commission feel if we let staff just put out just maybe a quick doodle poll or a quick email suggesting a couple of dates and seeing if we can't, you know, put aside 45 minutes to an hour to chat? Does that work for everybody?
Good.
Okay. Is that cool, Anne? Okay.
Would you like to have that done this week?
I would love for at least the email / doodle to go out soon. Yeah.
Okay, so so we're talking maybe end of this week into next week to actually have this meeting.
Right, I can send out a couple options with the thought of trying to do it as quickly as possible.
That sounds great. Anything else on that? Anybody have any questions on that? Okay. The next county commissioner meeting is on the 19th. So if there's any way for us to do it before that, that'd be great. Okay, new business. I know that we have the PAT team, the policy advisory team, has a presentation for us this evening, and I'll go ahead and move the floor over to, and I'm not sure if Christy wants to start that introduction. I know that the PAT team also has kind of a set list of presenters, so however you'd like to handle it, Christy, from here.
Mary Goddington, sorry, is going to share the presentation, and then the PAT members are going to give it. So if you can give permission to Mary to share, that would be great. Or it might already be open.
Okay, I think there should be, yep, there we go.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Augustina Remedios. I'm the city P&Z rep on the policy advisory team. Thank you so much for scheduling us in tonight and taking the time to have this conversation and let us bring forward our recommendations to you. We would ask if you hold your questions and comments until the end. We factored in some time for conversation and question and comments. So to start, we are the policy advisory team. We're a group of folks coming from various parts of the community who all care about making sure that Lake County residents can find safe and quality housing within their budget, of course. Our goal, again, is for there to be more safe and quality housing options for the entire community. And in order to accomplish this goal, we focus on finding ways to improve land use regulations. To start us off, we actually have a video here of one of our team members, and she's going to share her personal housing experience within Lake County.
One second, sometimes the audio doesn't work the first time around.
My name is Katie Anderson, and I am a member of the policy advisory team for affordable housing. I've lived in Colorado my entire life, but specifically in Leadville for about 3.5 years. I moved here in 2017 with my partner at the time. We found a rental that wasn't really affordable, but we went for it because we really wanted to live here. We lived there for about 1.5 years, and then our landlord informed us she was going to raise the rent $200 more than what we were paying. So we decided to look elsewhere. We couldn't find anything, so we decided to move into a pop-up camper for the summer in hopes of saving money and finding something more affordable. We fortunately did, but we couldn't move in until the middle of October. So it got pretty cold there towards the end. In the beginning of 2020, I moved out of my partner's house and lived a couple different places, but I really wanted to live on my own due to the pandemic. Fortunately, I found a Craigslist ad that was advertising a $600 a month studio. It was very short and non-descriptive, but I went for it because I've learned up here you can't pass up any housing opportunity. I got a hold of the landlord and he told me that over 30 people had called about the place in a very short period of time, but he was willing to show it to me. So I looked at it the next day and he offered it to me on the spot. I feel very grateful, but I can't help but think what happened to the 30 plus people that were hoping to move into that place. And unfortunately, my story is not unique in that this happens all the time up here. Our housing situation is only getting worse, and all of our policy interventions will take time to translate into affordable housing for our community members. So now is the time to act. Thank you for listening to my story.
So kind of as some of the points that Katie hit, we feel that this work is important because we all know that housing is a big issue. Currently, as of today, actually, there are maybe 3 homes that are on the market in Lake County that are listed under $1 million. A lot of the time, as we all know, any new housing that comes about is going to second homeowners. And we think that it's good to identify and make changes now that can support housing for residents to live in Lake County full-time. So to get to the background of how we got to this point, basically our process works we started by learning about zoning and how it affects what gets built. We also studied various approaches to housing that can make it a lot more affordable. Next, we took some site visits to Chaffee County and a virtual one in Summit County that one of our fabulous consultants put together for us. In both tours, we heard from experts in various housing approaches, and we learned about some of the housing developments in the area that have been successful for serving full-time residents. From there, we had a meeting with you all in June, and we also looked at recommendations from the comp plan, reviewed zoning code, and looked for example code from other communities. And finally, our group worked really great together to create our own priorities and taking everything prior into account to kind of come up with some recommendations that we all really felt good about. So to start off, first we have more of a finding rather than a recommendation. And this kind of came about from our meeting in June. So after looking at the comprehensive plan, we looked into the recommendation to rezone recreational lots that are in the residential influx area. And we thought it might have been a good opportunity to increase the density near urban service areas, and it aligned with all of your priorities, like I said in June when we had spoken or had that first meeting. However, after additional review, we decided that this wasn't a super high priority for the PAT since it would have minimal impact for housing. But like I said, we wanted to share this finding with you tonight to get started. Our first recommendation is that we would like a voice in the housing PUD process, or in the PUD process. As larger developments are coming down the pipeline, we feel that it's really important for us to, as somebody that's focusing on housing, or as a body that's focusing on housing, to really partake in that process. Currently it's happening informally, but we would love if the BOC could direct the planning department to do this formally and send a request for feedback to the Leadville housing, or the lead housing coordinator, Christy Galarza, until the Housing Authority has capacity to get feedback from the PAT and the Housing Coalition for referrals. So up next, we have Jack Saunders presenting 2 more of our recommendations.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Augustina said, I'm Jack Saunders. I'm a local home builder. I moved to Leadville in 1974, and we did not have this crisis, but we certainly do now as far as affordability, as most everyone on this call knows. Yeah, thank you. Here's some national and local costs. And I'm assuming the national and the costs are based on probably a 1,500 square foot house. I know that 461 figure for Lake County average cost is somewhat modest, especially given the fact that lumber costs alone, just that one commodity, has doubled since last summer. So it's certainly not in our favor, but so as you can see, the national costs are 250 to 400,000, and locally it's hard to build a house for less than really $400,000 here in Lake County, unless it's perhaps a accessory dwelling unit that is parking underneath and a living unit, and probably at most 2 bedrooms upstairs. But nonetheless, but when you take into account the area median income, and you go 80% of that number or up to 120% of that number, we're looking at, people need to be able to be affordable, need to be in the $182,000 to $275,000 range. And unless it's a major fixer-upper, that just does not exist anymore in Leadville or Lake County. And as Augustina alluded to, there's only 3 houses available for less than $1 million, and that certainly is not affordable. So anyway, some of the recommendations that we came up with, they sort of work. There's a major contradiction here. The first one is a fee in lieu of some benefits. And being a builder and a hopeful land developer, the first one really doesn't pan out too well, because just the cost of designing and engineering a new subdivision is phenomenal before you even break ground. And then once you have the plan in place, the cost to put all the infrastructure in is huge. All the water, the sewer, the gas, electricity, your shallow utilities. It's crazy. And that's before you even go vertical. And I think of what John Lichtenegger is going through right now. He's taken a major risk, and right now the market supports that risk. Let's just hope he's successful in finishing and completing that project, and that there's a reward at the end of his taking his risks. So the first one, subdivision fees. We're talking about basically carrots and sticks here, and that's definitely a stick. If you want to subdivide your land and get our approval, then by God, you're going to put up 10% of your project for affordable housing. And when we say affordable housing, we haven't even defined what affordable housing. Well, we've defined it in that it's unrealistic, from 182 to whatever that let's say $275,000. So it's still hard to get there. And as one of the participants in the Housing Coalition said, you got to keep the developers whole. They're not. You can't just take one part of the community and say, okay, Mr. Developer, you're going to solve our affordable housing crisis. It's got to be shared by all. If it's going to be a community priority, it needs to be shared by the community. And so then there's our incentives that can incentivize a developer. Some of those, and I know the county, you know, we're speaking of the county, it's just not the county or the city. In this community, as you're aware, we have utilities that are operated by other entities than the city and the county, such as water district. So, and we can get to water here in a minute. So there are some incentives. I know the city has the tax increment financing. Perhaps we can, if we were to create some funding mechanisms, we would be able to perhaps incentivize developers saying, hey, we can, you know, we'll pay for the fees. I know when I first got involved in politics locally, this was 30 years ago, we actually paved the road through Grand West. The county paid for the paving of the road through Grand West. And there was a public benefit as well as a benefit for the developer. Let's see, there are carrots as well as sticks. And then partnering with developers in aligning community goals is a major issue or opportunity as well. So as a policy action team, we encourage all public entities to partner with and see how can we help you. Is there land perhaps that the county has that they're not using, that is not producing any tax base, that they could swap with a developer for some developed lots for affordable housing. Is another example of how the public can partner and make it a win-win situation. Win for the community, win for the county, win for the builder and the developer. Mary, I think that's it on that section. And then the other item we wanted to touch on was water. And we know that commissioners had authorized water advisory committee a few years back who did gain some traction. I believe they've got a water decreed, and however, I know the lead lady on the committee got cancer and fortunately beat it, but at the time, you know, she had to go fight for her life, and so the committee sort of disbanded because of her lack of, or not being able to lead the charge. So water really impedes development outside the Parkville Water District, and in a sense, the benefit is that you do get greater density closer to the core, which is is good. But there's a lot of land in the county that just you can't even add an accessory dwelling unit because of state water law rules. And so if we had access to this decreed water, that would be awesome to see that happen. So we do recognize the work that both the commissioners and the Water Action Committee, the Water Accessibility Committee, I know they're called WACs. So we appreciate their efforts, and we'd like to pick up the ball, not exclusively, but learn more where the county is on their water augmentation plans, and if there's some way that we can help and to facilitate and expedite that would be a long-term foundational component to make more development in the county feasible. So I believe It's Amy Tate's going to take over the reins here.
All right, thank you, Jack. I guess the main reason why I think all of us are here today and all of us are involved in this policy advisory team is we're afraid of that we're at risk of losing our community because there is no housing. The housing that we're getting is being sold to second homeowners because the prices here are such that most that are here and work here can't afford it. And we realize that not one thing will solve this problem, but we're looking for ways to make small changes that can create the lasting stability that Lake County, full-time residents need and deserve. So that's kind of our presentation in a nutshell. And I guess now is the time for any questions or feedback that P&Z or the commissioners would like to offer. And one of our main things as the policy action team is capacity. We're here to offer our services. We're a very diverse group of voices in the community, and we'd just like to help where we can. Don't all start talking at once.
Hey, I had a question. I guess I can start it off. Thank you for bringing this to our attention, and I really do think it's something we can start working towards. And we had to take these first steps. So my question was, you guys visited virtually and in person a couple of affordable housing projects in other counties, and you mentioned that there's carrots and sticks. What are some of the examples of carrots and sticks that are being used in those other projects, like in Chaffee County, for example?
Well, we happen to have Reed McAuliffe on the call with us today, and I think he would be an excellent person to speak to that. He's kind of the impetus for a lot of those projects. Reed, would you mind speaking to some of that? I hate to put you on the spot, but.
No worries. Sure, I can at least throw a few things out there to give you some examples. The city of Salida passed an inclusionary housing ordinance back in 2018, and that was has proved to be very successful in partnering or providing for partnerships with developers to provide some affordable units. The city of Salida also provided water and sewer tap fee reductions or system development fee reductions. So if a home is restricted in permanence for affordable housing to 80% AMI and below, then there's a 60% reduction in the water and sewer tap fee. And then the city of Salida also set aside an affordable housing fund so that if a developer chooses to pay a fee in lieu for the inclusionary housing requirement, the funds can go into that, and then the city can figure out how to best use those funds. So I know that those aren't necessarily available in Lake County or in Leadville, but those are some of the things that are working. And then on the organizational side, at least, we can partner with the Division of Housing to go after grants that help bring the cost of housing down for the ultimate affordable buyer. So there's a number of different mechanisms out there. A lot of them may be complicated, maybe impossible, but everything should be considered.
And I probably should have introduced Reed a little bit more clearly for those of you who don't know who he is. He's the executive director of the Chaffee Housing Trust, and just is a great resource for all things affordable housing related.
One of the other places along the field trip was the new apartment complex there in Buena Vista that I think was done by Litec. And that was a Litec developer, I think. That's maybe not, I can't recall now if they were local or if they were just a Colorado Litec developer. That one seemed fairly successful also, and it feels a little bit more attainable for us due to our infrastructure, lack of control. Was there, does somebody kind of remember what the details were with that LIHTC development?
I remember they got 9% tax credit. It was one of the higher amounts granted. Mm-hmm. It was a big win for Chaffee County.
Commissioner Fiedler, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, I was just gonna hop in with some questions if that's okay. On the first, I guess the first recommendation on getting the housing voice in the PUD process officially is, so I mean presumably right now, I mean you could just make a public comment, but so my understanding, the ideal would be that the BOCC would ask for your comments to be specifically addressed in the sort of staff report or staff recommendations.
I think it's like along the lines of a referral agent, and I believe, and Anne, correct me if you're wrong, if I'm wrong, but I believe we already have that. It's just not a codified thing, but we have a list of referral agents that we send applications to. So I think we've added them to. I think we added them to the list a year or two ago, right?
That's correct. So we have a certain agencies by statute that we are required to refer applications to, but additionally, we have a list of stakeholders that we identify. And so we go through each application specifically to identify who those agencies are. And we added housing once, I believe the first time that we did a housing referral was actually when Noah and Katie were helping facilitate this before Christy joined the team. And since then we have been sending those recommendations to Christy.
And I think the purpose of this recommendation was, rather than putting it all on Christy's shoulders, was to make sure that it went to the policy action team, because it is such a diverse range of voices, so that, you know, although we're all interested in affordable housing, we all come from different perspectives, and sort of just getting everybody's perspective. And then we do a lot of consensus building in our group. I guess this is where I might say that if Jack and I could come to some sort of, you know, agreement on a recommendation, I'd say that we're a pretty strong group on working together and trying to do, you know, what's best for the community. So I think that's the strength in our group, is that we all come from different backgrounds and different perspectives, but we all listen and, you know, ask a lot of great questions and have some pretty robust discussions. And I think that's the purpose of asking for that, is where in the community is affordable housing, the voice of affordable housing, you know, should be in these future discussions for PUDs. And we thought that might be a good suggestion.
Agreed. And Commissioner Fiedler, I think you said you had a couple of questions. Were there any others?
Yeah, I guess one other is maybe we'll get into this in more detail when we have the work session, but I'd love to know if we have, from some of the analyses, I guess it was a priority like 2 years ago, there was that consulting firm that did sort of a housing analysis, but I'm curious if we have sort of like even a rough goal of the number of units or the breakdown of types of units that we think would make a difference. You know, I'm just trying to get my head around sort of the scale of what we need to achieve here. And in my head, I was sort of assuming that, like, I mean, like we're in the like 200 unit range for like really making a difference. But I don't know if that's like way high or way low or what, you know, what. Yeah. Anyway, I'd appreciate sort of comments either now or in a future work session on sort of making sure that the BOCC and the city understand the scale of what we're trying to move the needle on.
So our housing assessment and our action plan, I didn't give a specific number, because it's pretty hard to nail that down, but gosh, 200 units would be a dream at this point. We're very far behind. some of the information that we look at from time to time, and I'd have to get that for you. I don't have it in front of me, is, you know, somewhere around 900 units. But, you know, it's always a mix, and that's why we don't have one specific project. 900 units, say, would cover rentals as well. Like we are in sore need of rentals. That's why a LIHTC project would be so important to get off the ground right now. It's not about just sales and affordable housing units for people to buy. It's also safe rental units that we need as well. And so there's the housing assessment that we did recommended, you know, different types of housing stock. And so it's not a one size fits all. And so that's what we're here trying to encourage discussion about, and just try to get it affordable housing as a generally encouraged in the development process.
Thank you. That's a really good explanation. Yeah, I think, you know, there's just so many factors of what levels of housing we need to supply for that affordable / workforce group. So I think, and I think unfortunately the probably necessary number is not super realistically attainable. So I think it's as much as we possibly can is the answer to the question, unfortunately. Commissioner Marcella, you had your hand raised.
Thank you, Heather. I just had a quick question. I was really intrigued by the information that Reed had shared with the tap fees for sewer and water in Salida. And so I was wondering what the policy action team and Housing Coalition conversations with Leadville Sanitation or Parkville Water have been up to this point, or what those look like.
We have not had any with them. We actually, I would say probably 2 or 3 years ago, and on the Housing Coalition part of it, we did have some conversation with Parkville, and but we've always been turned down. So recently we have not had any more conversation. It would certainly be something to further discuss, but we don't have much, power, I guess, I would say, to incentivize that. I don't know if perhaps as county commissioners or even city council, joining together, maybe you as elected officials, I don't know, maybe you guys as a united voice might have a little bit more power that way, but we were not successful. Like I said, about 3 or 4 years ago when we talked to them about that a little bit. I know the mayor did quite a bit of talking to them a few years ago too, when he was actively engaged in the Housing Coalition, but they too have their own, financial constraints. So successfully, we were able to get like the, there was a citizen involved. And then of course we were very supportive of them reducing the tap fees for ADUs. And so that came into play. That was seen as a pretty good success and potential for more housing stock, but there were only a few people that were able to take advantage of that.
Yeah, I remember them being invited to the discussions during the community portions of the housing assessment and things like that. And, Amy's correct. They didn't really participate a whole lot. And I think, Amy touched on it a little bit that playing devil's advocate, we've got some pretty rough water lines throughout the city. We have a sanitation looking at needing a new sanitation plant. I don't necessarily think that they're flushed with cash to also help tremendously, but I think that it's super important that sooner rather than later we get them at the table to have this discussion to see how creative we can get, because I think everybody's going to have to get into a creative place. I think that Leadville's so unique in that aspect, and in the aspect of where we're at, and we're competing with our neighbors for builders. There's just so many factors that are working against us for affordable workforce housing that I think we're going to have to look at non-textbook answers for this to find solutions. And I think really any creative ideas are going to be welcome at this point. But I guess to that point, I wonder if we need to think about having some additional like roundtable discussions of like, who's got a whacked out crazy idea that wants to bring something forward. I know that Ann and I were talking the other day about the gentleman who's building the townhomes on Mountain View, and he is a business owner in Summit County, and he's like, well, my employees need housing. I'm tired of not being able to get employees because of housing, so I'm willing to invest in this property that then is an investment property for me, and I'll have these 5 units for me, and the other 5 can be either for my buddy's business, or they can be ones we rent out to other workers. And I just wonder, like, is that going to have to be the way we work this? Do we need to look at the angles of involving some of those business owners or involving Summit and Eagle County? And I really think we need to go back to that, bringing them to the table and being a part of that discussion, because we're housing many, many of their workers. So I think, asking for their participation and help isn't out of the question.
So I just wanted. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Amy, and I'll ask after you're done.
You can go ahead and finish up. It's okay.
I just was going to ask if the policy action team and if you have any examples of jurisdictions that have used the fee in lieu when a subdivision development is coming in, that we might.
Sure. So a fee in lieu is something that's customary in most codes. And the fee in lieu is actually versus providing public open space. So the way that it's codified in our code existing right now is if a development comes in, for instance, well, I won't use a for instance because that probably wouldn't be appropriate. But if a subdivision is coming in and it's going to be private and it won't be able to provide public open space, then there is a formula within the code to arrive at a fee. And the way the code reads is that the county can acquire that and put it towards the benefit of the community. And so I think that, there's been some discussion, and you'll see this in lots of other communities with the nexus study or impact fees, where you identify what your needs are within a community. And so when you have that as a funding mechanism, then you have the ability to direct those funds in a defensible manner or with a legal basis, directly and uniquely to your community. So yes, there's lots of other communities, Kayla, that operate in this fashion, and they've done studies to identify the nexus, the rationale and the connection in those impact fees, and then how they can legally direct those monies in a justifiable nexus. So it's a widely used practice, and certainly something that Lake County could look at as well.
Okay, thanks for that. I think it would be really helpful to see some of those examples so that we could understand kind of how those are leveraged to their fullest extent. That'd be really great. I also had one other question about the water piece, and I honestly think that Commissioner Mudge might be able to give us more information on that. And so, Commissioner Mudge, I'm wondering if you can perhaps walk us through what the county's service area is for water, because I think that might be important for us to know too. Or if you can just walk us through that in general, because I really am not nearly as educated in that as you are, but I think that's important to the conversation as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. If you want me to do that now, I'm a co-host, so I cannot raise a hand. So would you all like me to give you an update and share that now, or yes? Okay. I will share my screen with the map. So this is our water plan, our service area. And as you can see down here, it gets to like the edge, the western edge of Twin Lakes. And if you want me to zoom in at all, sure can do that. And so this is our service area. A1, we are currently decreed to serve, and A2, any applications that come in A2, because we don't have storage in Turquoise Lake and can't make those physical releases to into the Arkansas for where these depletions and uses might come from. We just have to make special arrangements with the water stakeholders in Turquoise Lake, such as Pueblo, Aurora, or Colorado Springs Utilities, to release that water for us. Not an insurmountable task. And I think it just remains to be seen what kind of development and requests we might get in that A2 area. So for our purposes, to keep things simpler, A1 is our decreed service area. We should have no problem augmenting water throughout this area. Currently, the water that we have, the 40 acre feet, is consumed by 23 acre feet is consumed by the golf course, and 17 acre feet is used for the evaporative loss on Hayden Pond. The Dairy Ditch, which is one of our water rights, we needed to get measurement devices in there. And so we finished that work last year in October, and now that is online with the Division of Water Resources. And we're figuring out the golf course, is going to use that water because it is a direct flow and we don't yet have storage capacity for it. So we can't use that dairy water until we have a place to store it. So we're trying to allocate that to irrigation use on the golf course, which I don't know in this year, but in theory, we're hoping might be able to take some of that, municipal use water that we have in the 40 acre feet, and then start accepting applications for augmentation planning. Currently, we don't have administration in place for the augmentation plan. We're working with the Upper Arkansas Water Conservancy District that operates out of Buena Vista and throughout Chaffee County, I should say. They actually have an office in Salida on Highway 50. And the ball is in their court currently. I did just touch in with their manager last week and over the last couple of weeks, and waiting for them to invite us to have a conversation with some of that planning. They're going to be able to provide us with an agreement for the services not to be included in their service boundary. There's been a long history there, and stop me if I'm just getting in the weeds, but I think there's been a lot of resistance in Lake County to be a part of the Conservancy District because if we were to be a new member, we'd have to pay back taxes for all the time that they were in existence that we were not included in their boundary. And so this is not, we should be very careful to not say that we are going to be a part of the Conservancy District. They are agreeing, and they do this with other jurisdictions, to work with us to create a plan for the administration, that service. And I'm hoping that come October of this year, we will have something in place. And I'm happy to answer any questions on this.
Hi, Commissioner Mudge. I'm Mary Coddington. We spoke briefly in June. I'm one of the consultants that has been working with the policy advisory team. I'm just wondering if there is anything that the group can do to help add capacity or to help support the process. If there's any element of community education piece about sort of this distinction of joining the Conservancy or anything else that the PAC can serve to support you in getting this over the finish line. It's exciting.
I think when we get to the point of developing that plan and like what that fee schedule looks like, that you guys can be a great resource to do that outreach and education to quell, you know, misconceptions or concerns. That would be fantastic. I'm also thinking that, you know, and it relates to land acquisition too. One of the things that we had talked about as a group, and I'd hope to make suggest as a priority in the water enterprise, is just that continued communication to folks who might get pressure from outside folks to sell their water. We want to try to keep the water in the county. There's multiple reasons: agriculture, environment, recreation, residential, commercial, irrigation, to keep the water in the county. And similar to what I think might be kind of that ongoing development of a county and hopefully water conservancy district support in folks saying, okay, I got this call from so-and-so who wants to buy my water, but do I have to do that? Or could the Lake County augmentation plan, if you do need to liquidate, is there an opportunity to work with Lake County to keep that water here, build a portfolio, and further, you know, the development direction that we might be encouraging? I wonder too, I mean, in the last few weeks, just with residents, year-round residents and residential interest and commercial interest both, you know, I've heard from multiple folks who have called people up, you know, cold calls of people not having their properties listed, and they've just signed contracts with folks out of state just because people are looking to the county for investments. I wonder if we don't want to try to do the same thing and promote that out, that there are locals here, there are people who work here, there are your neighbors who aren't property owners who are looking desperately for, you know, to be a homeowner.
Sarah, I have a question for you. We currently have 40 acre-feet decreed to us. And so when we do some changes, how many acre-feet would that enhance our current holdings, increase our current holdings?
So we need to update the agreements with Aurora so that those 40 acre-feet don't expire. Okay. And which is very important. And the dairy ditch, that direct flow averages about 32 to 34 acre-feet annually. So that would be an awesome addition to the portfolio if we were able to either completely supplement the 23 acre-feet, that portion that the golf course is currently utilizing. You know, it would be fantastic if we could, because right now 1/10 of an acre foot is projected to cover one unit, one home. And so it's quite a bit.
So we have a potential net gain of 23 acre-feet, and that could be used for the golf course, and that would free up the 23 acre-feet that they're currently using. So 23, yep. That's 230 uses of that water, 230 units, so to speak. If it's 1/10 of it, can you split it less than, well, I guess not. 1/10 would be the minimum unit.
1/10 would be the minimum unit. And in practice, when you get an augmentation plan running for 3+ years and you've measured and you meter, you know, you kind of get trends of actually how much water is being utilized, but you always charge the application and allocate that 1/10. Again, well, what I'm trying to say is as you're seasoned and operating, you would be able to stretch that water a little further, proving to the division that your math is adding up and the full 1/10 of an acre foot might not be utilized by each unit. And Jack, it's about 32 to 34 acre feet that the Dairy Ditch produces.
And would they need to maintain some of that?
At the Dairy Ditch?
Yeah.
No, that's just a direct flow. And right now we can only apply that to an applicant as it is physically running and available down Bartlett Gulch.
Does Lake County own any Twin Lakes shares? Do we own water shares, or is this?
No. The 40 acre feet is an agreement from Aurora Water when they purchased Hayden Meadows, and in a good faith effort to not completely dry out and or mitigate some of those impacts of taking those water rights off of Hayden Ranch. The other another option also that we've been talking about exploring is the Dilap Ditch, which is a ditch up by Turquoise Lake that runs to the golf course. And it's inoperable at the moment, but we have enough historic use from the 80s to 2000 where we can, the division wouldn't prohibit us from reviving that delivery. And there are inherent water rights with that. So we're working to clean up we're working to do some housekeeping so that we could turn to that opportunity as well, which would further, free up the 40 acre, more water. I mean, more water is great to have in your portfolio.
Sarah, one question about that. Is that rehabilitation mainly like heavy machinery, or is there like human manpower that can be helpful? Like, could volunteers help with something like that if they had some clear direction?
Yeah, I think there's so many holes in the ditch. So I've been told that it seems like the best use would be to set a pipeline in there. And so it's a matter of grading. I would have to walk Public Works, and I plan to walk through that ditch this summer just to kind of get fresh eyes on it. It would be a matter of grading. So yeah, there could be small machinery and or handwork that could be utilized. I don't know if that would happen this year, but
yeah, my thought is, when we say get creative, like maybe there is a local partner, maybe there's some way that we can make this a community effort to make it more cost effective to do. So don't hesitate to reach out on that.
Fantastic. Yeah, I also wonder, with the special districts, I don't know a ton about financing, but I do believe that Parkville has done some financing before on projects. Again, I'm sorry, I can't remember specifics whether that, I think it was a bigger project and a subdivision potentially, not just a single residential unit, but I wonder if that's, showing up to Parkville district board meetings, sanitation board meetings, just kind of getting a feel and supporting some of those things. You are, if you are served by Parkville Water, you are their constituents, and I wonder how, kind of creating and bringing something like that to their board would, how it's required to be done. And I see Jane Gowing is on here and might know a little bit more about special districts than I. She is on the sanitation district board, but it's, I think that there's folks who might not understand the enthusiasm and the urgency in doing that, and with some support from their, those who they're representing, that might go a long way. Cheryl Wells, who was on the Water Advisory Council, I believe is sitting on the Parkville Water Board currently.
That's correct. Well, thank you for getting us up to speed on where the water is. I know there was a lot of work that went into that, and I'm glad that we're definitely close to getting that done and available. That's a lot of work and lots of moving parts. So,
Amy.
Yes.
I have a question for Reed. Reed, does Chaffey County have any broad tax support basis for affordable housing, or is it all just small individual funding mechanisms?
Chaffey County recently created in the county an Office of Housing, and then that led to the creation of a housing authority. And so now the next discussion will be how to ultimately fund that housing authority. There's a great example with the 1A initiative that was passed a couple elections ago. Quarter of a percent sales tax to fund fire mitigation, recreation management, and watershed protection. And that one was very successful. So I think that's an example of what can be done. But a county-wide inclusionary housing ordinance is something that's also being considered in the long run.
I think the elephant in the room is, if affordable housing is a community priority, and I believe it is, it's going to take broad-based support, not just developers, not just the county increasing the mill levy. We all need to embrace the need, and we're all going to be suffering for the need if we don't address it.
Great. Thanks for bringing that up, Jack, because yeah, nothing happens without funding. And I think that's something that we are talking about too, but I don't know if we have time for that today to talk more about that. But thank you for bringing that up, because it is definitely the elephant in the room. How do we pay for all of this and the staffing for it and all that kind of stuff? So I think we've talked about the water, and I just want to revisit one more thing. And then also, so the one thing I want to revisit is, sorry, my dog's whining. I want to revisit the thoughts about having affordable housing voice in the PUD process. Does that seem like something that, along with the other review agencies, that this group, does that seem reasonable to P&Z that we could help in that capacity? Or and I guess we don't need to have that answered today, but just kind of want to get a feeling of if you guys think that's important, or if there's another entity, maybe in the community that might be better served with that. And then also want to hear just maybe if there's other things that with our time and we get together, at least once a month, if there's something else that, any other ideas that maybe you guys would like us to look at and research and take a look at.
Amy, I have a thought about that question, and I would say yes. I think that I think it's and I know I'm on the PAT and
you're muted
too. So, but that is critical input in instances when we are considering talking to a developer about a negotiation through the PUD process, we have to establish the nexus. We have to establish the basis of going into a negotiation or a condition of approval. And so absolutely, the comments and feedback that we get from that expert stakeholder group helps us establish that and determine that we do have a basis to bring forth as a recommendation for condition. So I think that it certainly holds a critical place.
I agree. I think both serving on the Planning Commission as well as on the PAT, I think it's obviously as many, we like to encourage as much input as we can at any of these kinds of application hearings and such, and to offer an easier way to bring the housing voice forward through referral comments, I think is a huge plus for us. I don't see any negative to doing that.
Can I chime in? I would agree. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great idea, and yeah, I don't see a downfall to that either. Some of the other things I wonder to focus or potentially definitely get feedback and perspective from our, you know, the city and county are talking about reviewing and revising or amending, making small amendments to the comp plan. I think it'd be hugely beneficial to look over the comp plan and identify successes and where we, you know, might identify some of those, or I mean, rectifying some of the zoning issues might be a larger task than just making amendments. But if you could at least, you know, look at a future land use plan, that would be, you know, a great tool for the Planning Commission and the board. The 3 mile plan that the city's comp plan has could be huge in working with utility providers and trying to get some sort of agreement on how, you know, who can play what part in finding and encouraging development in areas. And then there is, I was just trying to look up the ordinance, but as far as county land, you know, we do know we can provide a map of county land and figure out, you know, where either specific projects could take place, or we could start chipping away and finding land to liquidate for primary residents, you know, and get homeowners building their own houses. Those are a lot of the calls that I've actually been receiving to just find land because they've given up on being able to afford $500,000+ homes. And sorry, we have an ordinance that outlines how we might go about liquidating land, and so that would definitely need revised. And I'd be curious what your all thoughts might be in taking a look at that and providing us some feedback.
Yeah, I think those are some great thoughts as far as investigating. And I guess that brings up a question that I have a little bit, even serving on the PAT and things. But now we have the PAT, we have the Housing Coalition, and we have the Housing Authority. And I think at some point it would be really good to get, even I don't necessarily know who's going to be tasked with what and who's doing what. So I think to be the most effective, we probably need to come together and kind of say, okay, the housing policy, you know, policy advisory group is only focused on policy or code, or are they also advising on new ideas and ways to create affordable housing? And if so, how does that fit with the Housing Coalition and the Housing Authority? So kind of identifying what the roles of those three, and if there are others, I think it would be helpful for me to kind of know then what our goals how to create goals and with who to be creating those with. And I think it also helps understand who should be the referring body for applications for the Planning Commission based on whose roles are kind of what. So in perhaps that's kind of, I mean, I know that Amy and Christy are kind of involved in all of those things. So you guys probably have a much clearer picture of the separation of those three, but I think a lot of us are just thinking everybody's trying to fix affordable housing, which I think everybody is, but I think there's more detail than that.
Thanks, Heather, for bringing that up. I am happy to coordinate a meeting about that, probably later on in the summer, just because deed restriction and funding mechanisms are going to come up. Does that sound like it would be okay timing if it was later in the summer? Or I could just do it by email too. I just don't know which would be more collaborative.
I think that would be helpful at first, to just kind of send out, here's what each group's focus points kind of are at, and you know, and then I think from there we should coordinate, or what I think would be great is if we could coordinate ways that those three groups are working together, and then you know, reporting back to these kind of entities as to kind of what's working and what's not. I think the ideas of creating kind of those roundtable discussions with Parkville Water and Leadville Sanitation, and you know, other possible creative solutions. It just would be helpful to know who should be at that table and which group should be organizing that out of those three. So I think if we have a clear picture of what the three groups are doing and how they're going to work together, will help us identify kind of our steps forward.
Thanks for that feedback.
One thing that I'm particularly curious about with potential, you know, liquidation of county land and or identifying certain spots to incentivize greater development or more inclusive development, and including affordable units, would be what level, you know, what options are there for deed restrictions? Can we have something very simple that's just said, you know, I know the housing trust, what I, you know, which isn't super in depth on the language that those deed restrictions include. I think you all take there's a restriction to how much, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, my words are failing me. How much profit you can have in selling. And so that in turn is supposed to incentivize and keep kind of a lower or be more attainable for folks. But I just wonder if we could put something on our county land that just says, you need to sell to a primary resident and somebody has to live, you know, that you have to occupy for at least 2 years. And if you're in violation, then X, Y, and Z happens. So I'd love to see like a menu of, you know, detail and simplicity of what that could look like.
I think those are awesome ideas, Sarah, and a great lead in to, there's a subcommittee working just on deed restriction with everything you just said included in that kind of work. And so I think that and Christy, that's coming on the 22nd, right? Is that correct?
That's right, 6 to 7 p.m.
But it's spot on to everything that, you know, the setting up those guidelines and looking at ways to make those options available in perpetuity. And so, yeah, that's perfect. And that's exactly what some of the peripheral work that's going on is looking to accomplish. And so there's going to be a presentation reporting back to the board on the 22nd. That's awesome.
One quick thing, as far as looking at the comprehensive plan goes, we divvied it out into different parts of the plan, and I'm in the group or subcommittee, I suppose, that's looking at housing and how we can kind of make change within the comprehensive plan to do that. So I think as far as the Pat working on that, if that is something that we do, that the connections there might work out pretty well for that sort of thing. So yeah, any feedback that you have for us moving into that would be greatly appreciated.
Okay, does anybody have anything else? Otherwise, we really appreciate your time and giving us the opportunity to let you know what we've been up to over the last just over almost 2 years now. We've been up to other things too, but just giving us some time to talk to you about housing and see what else we can do for you. This is a capacity building group as well, and we're happy to help where we can.
Thank you for all the work you guys have done. I'm really excited about what our next steps are and what we can work towards. And so I think the information that you guys presented here today was really good for us. So thank you so much for taking the time.
I think it'd be great too if we could just check in more often and come to not necessarily join the whole PAT team, but like have like a 10-minute kind of check-in of where we're at and what kind of are the mechanics and logistics that we might have to go through if we want to address X, Y, and Z. That will go a long way, and even being able to communicate that and spitball those ideas with those consultants that work with you, then maybe there's like a good liaison of knowing like exactly kind of figuring out and having seen those similar challenges as I would presume they would come up, with how we actually implement and kind of get those mechanics laid out for Lake. But that might be really helpful as well.
Sure. And, I guess, would you prefer that at like a P&Z meeting or the commissioner meeting or?
Well, I guess it would be great. It's great to see everybody who's participated, or a lot of the folks that participate. So I think with Planning Commission would be great. Maybe, I don't know, I guess I'm sorry, I don't really have a concrete suggestion, but it'd just be great to, I appreciate Christy coming and giving us updates, but really like taking, 10, 15 minutes just to kind of really strategize together and work towards keeping things moving. So however that might come along best.
Okay, well, we'll talk about that in our next meeting. Then I think we can talk about schedules and all that and see if we can make that work. Thank you.
Thank you guys for being here and presenting, and everybody for listening and hearing what we've been up to. Are there any other questions or anything like that before we move along? Okay. Thank you again. Jack, did you have something? Are you raising your hand over there? Or are you just waving? The next thing we had on our agenda was just some updates, and really it was just kind of a quick like how the next few meetings were going to go. And I know we have a lot on our plate coming up here with the applications that are coming up, and I know that we also want to add in there the review of the comp plan, kind of going through that. So Anne, can you kind of lay out what our next month looks like, month and a half?
I was muted, oops. So absolutely, the next, our second meeting in May is really spoken for. We definitely are going to have no room probably because we do have that variance, or excuse me, a vacation and not the good kind, and a conditional use permit. I believe that Paul is anticipating, and maybe he can fill in, but I think that we're thinking we're going to have applications for you both meetings in June. If we only have one on, we might have some space in there to jump to some work session kind of things. But I think this first meeting in May will really be our best chance to move forward on any kind of work session kind of things. So that would be May 10th.
Okay, thank you. So that looks like one work session as far as our regularly scheduled programming works. I know that, and I think that I've gotten a couple of questions from Planning Commission members outside of our meetings as far as kind of where things went, because we were on this backcountry zoning discussion, and that kind of halted without a whole lot of explanation. So I just want to backtrack a little bit on that. I think the commissioners would like us to put that on hold for a minute, and if somebody wants to speak to that, they may. But so that we can look at the comp plan kind of at the same time that the city's looking at the comp plan. I have, I think that there's definitely, I would love to perhaps maybe have a little bit of time devoted, and I don't know if we want to try to do that tonight with the last half hour, to kind of chat about some of this stuff with the commissioners as far as what they'd like our next few focuses to be. I personally feel like if we put backcountry on the back burner again, we're probably going to lose it, and so I think that needs to be a decision that's pretty firmly made fairly quickly, because we've tried in the past to put it on the back burner and bring it back up again, and it you almost have to start over. If it wasn't such a long process to create the backcountry district and so much involved in it, I would say, sure, it maybe isn't the very top priority. I still feel pretty strongly that it is a priority for Lake County to pass the backcountry district, especially with the fact that things are becoming overdeveloped right now. So I think, I think that that's something that I would, whether we do it tonight or at another meeting, I think I'd like to discuss that fairly soon with the commissioners, just so that we know what our plan moving forward is, and allow any other commissioners to give their thoughts on that and opinions on that as well. But that's kind of where we're at. So we have one work session, it looks like, oh, and we have the other one. So two opportunities. Anne just sent the second meeting for this month at the end of the month, the 26th, would be available for a work session, and then May 10th. So we have two potential work sessions, and then our summer is probably going to be really busy, and we're going to have to pick back up again in the fall, unless we do any special meetings, which are possibilities over the summer months. So with that being said, I'd love to get people's thoughts on how we do this moving for the next half hour and or the next two work sessions.
Heather, my question is about the postponing of the backcountry. It's been over 3 years when we started on that, and we made some progress back then. And then, like you said, we started all over again, and this is the best we've got to. And I thought we had a pretty good session going on it. And what is the real reason that we're going to put it on the back burner? Is it so that we study the comp plan, make changes in the comp plan first? Or I really would like to know the big reason we're doing this, please.
I would have to allow our commissioners to speak to that, I think.
I can, so the bat, okay. There's a lot of, I guess, behind the scenes capacity drain or attention that would the backcountry rezoning would take. We are trying to do hiring for land use to build that capacity and prioritizing that rezone process while we're also looking at the comp plan. Just doesn't seem like a wise investment of our time. A lot of the conversations too, there's challenges with expectations from the building community. And so it'd be really great. I think the board and staff wants to come to, we need to do some housekeeping on code development expectations and with the capacity and currently the services that we are getting from Colorado Code Consulting, we just don't have the capacity to monitor or go through that process at this time.
So the, I mean, and I guess like some further detail I think would be a little bit helpful. I think there's a few of us who are willing to volunteer our time to do some work outside of it if that's going to help relieve staff, but I guess I don't know that any of the issues have been identified specifically. I just know that there are issues, and so I think that's, or issues or concerns that that you may feel like need to be resolved before you feel good moving backcountry forward, but I don't know specifically what those are in order to address them. We did try to, you know, address a lot of them in our last meeting. And I know you guys couldn't be there, but we did send that out to try to get some feedback from you as to what the concerns were. I did get one from Commissioner Fiedler, but I didn't get those from you guys. So I'm just not sure what, it's just hard to know if we can still move this project that we've been working really hard on forward, if we can do it without utilizing too much staff time, if there's ways that we can get creative and do that as a planning commission, or if there are issues that like we can't address. We just don't know what the specific concerns are that are causing us to, you know, put a stop on it. I think you're muted still, Sarah, if you're trying to talk.
Sorry. No, I don't think there are any issues that the Planning Commission could really help with. I think it's just a matter of aligning and supporting increased capacity, as well as, you know, some of those variances and those environmental health issues, being able to monitor and manage the access issues that I am afraid would get blown out of control at the moment. We're doing a lot of hiring across the county, which I really think would, by the end of the year, we'll be able to support kind of revisiting this, in my opinion.
I think it's hard for me because right now those zoning districts that we're looking at, they allow building and they allow access and they allow all of those things currently, just on a much larger scale. And so it's really hard for me to understand why creating more limitations in there is a concern that it's going to cause more issue. And I guess that's where it's just hard, because from my perspective, you know, I think one of the main goals of this is to discourage mass amounts of development and access throughout those areas. And, you know, I've seen it just go crazy over in Summit County where that's happened. And it especially happened exactly when we're in a real estate market like we are in right now, where there isn't anything. So a mining claim you can buy for $50,000 for 10 acres. And if that means I need to spend $100,000 to build my house up there, it's going to cost me $100,000 extra. That's still more attainable than buying a $150,000 city lot. And so if we don't put those protections on there, then I think you are looking at crazy unreined growth in the backcountry. And I think that, I mean, essentially, I think that's a decision we're making right now. Before the summer comes, and there's no land for sale right now. There's no houses for sale. There's no anything for sale. And so that is going to be the place they look. And I think we have to decide as a community if we're okay with that, if we're okay that that's what happens and that's what goes on up there. But I just have a hard time understanding that the concern is that it's going to create more growth when really the purpose of this is to limit it pretty significantly.
Heather, I agree with what you're saying. I think we have got to avoid reinventing the wheel. We got to look at what has happened in our neighboring counties. For instance, Summit County, you brought that up. But another good example is Pitkin County, where there is a lot of money, where people really wanted to build big homes, 7,000-8,000 square foot homes out in the backcountry. Their county commissioners and their planning and zoning said, no, we don't want that. We don't want the backcountry spoiled with big homes. We want to leave that as primitive as possible. So I would really encourage the county commissioners to look at that in total and try to let us get this backcountry out of the way. Actually, I'm pleading that they would do that. Thank you.
So I can chime in. So Heather, you sent around that questionnaire. Could maybe, I mean, whether we move forward with this as a top priority or not, if you could recirculate that. I mean, I think for me, it's just hard to judge how much capacity of the staff, right, wrapping this up will be. Until we know, like, I mean, I feel like we need to sort of get like that punch list of questions on the table and like really look at it and be like, okay, is this like 10 hours of work or like months of research figuring something out, or like a mapping exercise? Like so again, I feel like just a little bit like unclear, how to manage the workflow, for the building and land use staff, given other things on their plate.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to send that back out. And if there's anybody else, members of the public or anybody else that's here that wants me to send that to them, I'm happy to do that. Yeah, I think those few issues, and I think that at the end of the day, just like probably anything that we can possibly pass is not going to be perfect. But I think the goal of the Planning Commission this far is to make it better than it is right now, without causing huge consequences to doing that. And I think we're there. So I would love to, I would love to send it out. I think that, I think the other thing that probably you guys struggle as the county commissioners is you're not necessarily seeing the public will for this, but I think it's absolutely there. I mean, I just deal with it every day. So it's easy for me to see, but maybe not as easy for you to see. So I'm happy to, you know, happy to get whatever information I can out there to you guys to help with that. I think the biggest thing that we would have to focus on if we were looking at moving this forward is, again, like, what is it now and what is this changing? And like I said, it may not answer and fix all of the pieces, but it's going to make it better than it is, and something that then we can, I feel like you can amend things and change things in that zone district much easier than you can creating one that's perfect to start with. It's just not going to happen. So that's the idea behind that. But I absolutely think it's important to get feedback on that. And so I'll create that questionnaire again, just a blank version, and I'll email it out to everybody again and see what we can do.
Yeah, and also just to be clear, I mean, for me, it's like I totally take on board, you know, Howard's your comments and Heather's yours. You know, I think, you know, I agree that, you know, we want to try to get ahead of this before problems are caused. I also think that, you know, with limited staff time, you know, I also see, you know, I'd love, you know, having just had the affordable housing presentation, you know, I'd hate to see, you know, more large, you know, PUDs come through or other developments, and we get behind the 8 ball on having those come in how we want. And, you know, again, just trying to balance, you know, which is the worst thing to be too late on. And, you know, again, I just love to get a better handle on, you know, like I don't want to say, oh, let's just try to crank out the backcountry zoning really fast, and then it's not fast, you know, and we end up being like a year before we add anything to our comp plan or do anything on affordable housing.
So to that note, and Anne can feel free to speak up because she's on the PAT too, but you know, the policy advisory team looked at our code, which is going to determine what we can do with affordable housing more than the comp plan. The comp plan is visionary document, and the visionary document we amended a couple of years ago to include affordable housing. Could we get in there and dive deeper into it and make some more visions to that? For sure. But right now our comp plan fully supports affordable housing, fully supports us codifying and creating applications and supplying and supporting applications that do affordable housing. But there wasn't much in our code that we on the policy advisory team could look at changing, because so much of our issues in the county outside of the city limits with affordable housing is infrastructure costs, and it boils down to water rights and sanitation, not having the water and sanitation lines out there. And those are our biggest hurdles with housing in the county. And so I fully agree that housing needs to be on the forefront for the county. And I think the Planning Commission needs to be there to support that however we can. I don't see a whole lot of things that the Planning Commission can do than to write some more words in the comp plan that support it, because there's just not a whole lot we have control over at this moment until some of those other things happen. And like I brought up earlier, I personally would love to see us do more on the as far as us, meaning the county, not the Planning Commission, but the county and the city, you know, trying to think out of the box and trying to get Summit and Eagle County to the table and trying to just figure out some of these solutions, try to get a LIHTC developer, those things that I know the Housing Coalition is already working on. But I think that that's where we've got to like pour our support. I'm all about looking at the comp plan because I think we wanted to do that anyway, to support affordable housing, but more so because we had some concerns on what we're allowing density wise in certain areas. And if we have too high of density in some areas and too low of density in other areas, that would help support that affordable housing area, or as far as our mapping master plan. But that's kind of the extent of it, unless somebody else has something that they think the county Planning Commission can really pour into a project. And I think that's why we had, you know, had this first, and then that was going to be, okay, now let's dive into what we can do for master planning for the county. And again, anybody wants to speak up and say anything in addition to that is fine.
I would just offer that I think that they're all tools as we look at smart growth and preservation of our community and important overall priorities and goals, and carving out those opportunities for housing, attainable housing in our community, as well as preserving the character and nature of our community, and what that looks like. So of course the advisory document, as well as looking at the regulatory side of things. And I think that all of these have a correlation to one another. I think the backcountry has a correlation to the preservation of our community. Looking at the comp plan as an advisory document, looking at the code as, so you have to, I think, pair all of these layers together to reach all of those goals. So I think it is kind of hard to prioritize where things are at, because I think all of them have an intricacy to them and when you put them all together, have, a lot of power, and it's layering all those tools together. So I think sometimes it is kind of hard to identify where the priorities are. So I absolutely recognize that. I don't know if it would be helpful or not to lay out, we kind of had this running workflow of what backcountry would entail, and certainly honoring the fact, Paul and I are underwater, and it, but to have an idea of what the work would look like to support it, and what needs to be done, and where, we'd already kind of reached out to the Planning Commission and said, hey, listen, as we move this forward, we're going to ask for your help. And when we're doing noticing, and when we're doing the marketing piece, that Aaron had come on to kind of do the fact sheet. And so we would definitely be reaching out for the support of the Planning Commission if it would be something that wants consideration, but absolutely we would be looking for ways to increase our bandwidth. And I think the plan had been to incorporate the talents and time and commitment from the Planning Commission to make that happen. So I don't know if it would be beneficial to spend, not a lot of time, because that's counterproductive, but just a little bit to share kind of what that workflow looked like, and where we thought there would be opportunities that the Planning Commission could help increase our bandwidth if it were to be something that wanted to be done. If it's certainly not, then we're here at your disposal for whatever everyone believes is the best outcomes. But that's something we could offer if it would be helpful.
I would like to indicate that Heather and Howard have been on the Planning Commission for, Heather, how long?
I don't know, forever.
Howard, for how long? Try that again, Howard.
2 times forever.
Yeah, a few times forever. But anyway.
I think that I would like to remind the Board of County Commissioners that Howard and Heather have a great deal of land use experience here in Lake County. I have a lot of land use experience, but in a lot of different places, not so much here in Lake County. And I think that Heather's and Howard's thoughts about priorities with regard to this department, I'd like to ask you to take that seriously. I haven't heard Heather say anything that I disagreed with this evening. I'll leave it at that.
Jamie Seifer, you had your hand up.
Cool. Thank you, Heather, and thanks to the Planning Commission here. Underinformed citizen here, just with a quick opinion and a hot take. I think I went to one other meeting about the backcountry thing. And in general, I think we shouldn't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I agree that there's an urgency to this issue. I think we can look to a lot of other really cool rural mountain communities that have had a lot of their land get snatched up and turned into giant homes and all sorts of other things. And getting something in place, again, underinformed here, but it sounds like Heather and the team have some amount of a plan. If it's a matter of just doing it, having some rules sooner rather than better. I think we should do that. And to the point about staff, like, if what that means is that a bunch of like backcountry permit things just take a while, great, fine, okay, we'll get to it later. Let's prioritize affordable housing and the other things that the limited and expanding staff are working on. But yeah, I agree with Howard and Heather, getting something in place sooner. Once we lose it, it's gone. So just my 3 cents. Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie. And then Aaron Palin, I saw you. Yeah.
Yeah. I just kind of wanted to take a moment and maybe tie this all together. So I am relatively new to the Planning Commission. And when I joined and prior to even my interview, I read the comp plan. And I don't entirely know what our refocus of going through it again is going to be. And so like in our future work sessions, I look forward to that. But I just want to draw attention real quick back to the vision. The start of the second paragraph of the comp plan literally says the rivers, valleys, mountains, and the heritage still visible in the landscape are the community's most fundamental assets. And I think the backcountry zone only supports our core fundamental belief of keeping Lake County what it is, our mountain communities, I spend more time in Summit. I work for an agent, a real estate agent. I have all the housing stories you want. Kicked out because someone sold, you know, bad landlords, moving every year, barely able to get my own place, couldn't even afford Summit County's deed restricted because they bumped the AMI to couples because couples were making too much, but individuals were making too little. You name it, I've been a part of it. And as we get more expensive development, the $400,000 to $600,000 buyers come into the town, they get into the 1-bedrooms. The $300,000 to $500,000 buyers then get into the studios. 3 years ago, I went to buy a studio in Summit and I got bought out, or I lost 5 402 square feet studio offers to cash investment sight unseen because they had the 300,000 and the 300,000 wasn't getting them what it used to get them. And so I feel like that could potentially just be one of the aspects that also, you know, affects affordable housing in itself. But part of this is losing what these communities are, like why everyone, both locals and investors and vacationers, enjoy about it. And if we start developing our hillsides and developing this backcountry area, we lose what brought everyone here. And so since we're talking about the comp plan, since we're talking about backcountry, I just kind of wanted to tie it all together because I think we're actually all talking about the same thing. And again, I'm new, so I'm still very much trying to learn. And I know that the staffing hours and how like staffing, it's always hard. So, but I thought we, as the Planning Commission, we were kind of trying to divvy up tasks. And I thought that was, I don't know any better. So I kind of just assumed that that was how you handle a big project like this. So yeah, I'm here for it. Anyway, sorry, thanks.
No apologies, thank you.
I just want to comment though that it seems like we're talking about the backcountry zone in the aspect of preventing development and preventing it being used as affordable housing, but the code we wrote or proposed is still allowing single family residences throughout the backcountry zone. It just, they have to meet those same standards that they would for ag forestry, just there's a size limitation on those houses. You know, we're restricting some development, but I was under the understanding that we're lessening the barriers for other kind of development, right? We're lessening the barriers for cabin development and for vacation homes. So I don't know if it's the best way to phrase it that we're saving our hillsides, because I think we're opening it up for more. We're going to start seeing a lot more cabins on the hillsides. So I just, you know, that's where I think maybe we need to have a discussion. What's our main fear here? What are we really trying to prevent? Are we trying to prevent all housing? Because it doesn't seem like it. We're trying to prevent plowed roads. Are we trying to prevent mansions? I mean, that's what it seems like the biggest opposition everyone has is, right, is mansions, is large homes. So I'm just saying maybe there's hesitation because it's a large rezone. What if there's other, if we're really concerned about this summer, because I do think that the pressure is here. I mean, it's happening. Maybe there's some other ways we can go about a stopgap solution or something that would prevent the problems we really see happening with, you know, and still giving ourselves the time to go through the entire code again, or to address the problems the commissioners see in the code. I just think like maybe we put a quick cap on size limitation for ag forestry zone, where up to a certain level we don't worry about it, and up above a certain level it's subject to further review or planning commission review or something like that. That might help be a really quick solution to the mansion problem that we're worried about having on these mining claims. Maybe we make it really clear that we're not going to be maintaining any of these roads, and that they're not allowed to maintain those roads and plow them or pave them if they want to. I mean, there's several large houses across the Sugarloaf Dam that we tell them, too bad, you don't get to go to your house, you don't get to plow there, even if it's the nicest house in the county with the only elevator in the county. You don't get to plow there. You have to take a snow machine in or something in the winter. So that's my comment, is just that maybe we're not preventing development by this backcountry zone. We're just trying to do it smarter. So maybe there's a readily available solution to solve the most immediate problems right in front of us.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if there's more conversations to be had about other solutions, I think those are definitely them. I mean, I agree that the only issue is not preventing mass development up there. And by mass, I don't necessarily mean all of them being mansions. I think that once you have the chances of somebody who has a 900 square foot cabin wanting to pave a road or upgrade a road all the way up to their property is pretty low. But once you're in the 3,000 square foot range, then maybe they're going to do it. And so I think the idea is really just that you're creating uses that are harmonious with the land around it, which is national forest and BLM. And you know, and I think that in a lot of this vision, it was that smaller cabins / camping, those kinds of things are harmonious with that land, whereas mass development maybe isn't. I think, you know, to Aaron's note about affordable, how this ties to affordable housing, I think, you know, and Amy Tate's on here too, and she could probably give her perspective, but I think that once you open the floodgates for those $1 million buyers, they're going to come, and then that's going to continue to drive those prices up. Right now, you know, the big problem with our community is that we have no land and we have no houses for sale, but that's also a plus in the fact that we're also not going to see those big mass developments happen super quickly because it's hard for them to get there. So we at least have that little bit of barrier to help us control how our land is going to get developed moving forward. Obviously, we have to move quickly on that no matter what we're talking about, backcountry or regular development, but you know, the fact that there isn't anything available right now for them to do, I think is helping that along. But Amy Tate did raise her hand. Go ahead, Amy.
Yeah, I think a lot of this with the backcountry is just that it's going to become more about who can afford to sink $100 grand into a property, and it may or may not be a harmonious use. And I think that there's an incredible amount of thought that has gone into this over the last several years. I mean, I remember this being talked about over 10 years ago. And I just feel like this is another example of where we maybe, you know, we're behind the ball on this. And I think it's a very important thing to get past. And like Jamie said, something is better than nothing, because at this point, it's just the people that have a ton of money that will be able to use these properties, and it may or may not be a harmonious use. It may be a huge property, and there's nothing that we can say or do about it. If we have some say in it of how we want this to work with our property, is that, you know, it's an overlay of an area where we don't want to risk, you know, people, you know, having huge amounts of people back there and that sort of thing. So if it is more of a smaller use of the property, and once we have this in place, then we can start to, you know, work on it. If something isn't working, then we can work with it and tweak it. And I just think there's an awful lot of thought that's gone through with this, especially with Heather and Howard, as was said by Paul, that this is not something that came in overnight. This is definitely something that's been thought through very, very well. That's my 2 cents. And I would agree with Heather. We deal with this on a daily basis in real estate. It's a very, there's people all the time. Last summer was insane in the amount of inquiries we got about these properties, and people are willing to throw as much money as they can to just have their place in the backcountry. So.
Thank you, Amy. Does anybody else have any?
I just had a quick question, which is, when was the discussion, or like what is, I would like to have a further discussion, I guess, about why we don't want some of these size restrictions, particularly if mansions are our big concern, why we wouldn't be talking further about putting those size restrictions on all ag forestry property. If that's what we're, you know, just if we don't want mansions in the county and we want to preserve our space, those large houses would be built in open spaces and be invisible view sheds.
I think Anne looks like she unmuted, but offhand, I feel like that would be a big ask of the commissioners to say, hey, even these properties that are super easily accessible right now, I think you'd have a pretty big pushback from people who bought land with the idea that they could do that. You know, the properties that we outlined in the backcountry district are quite different in the fact of their access limitations, infrastructure limitations, all of that already limit them from doing that this isn't as big of a jump to say, okay, we're changing the zoning, but to do that on ag forestry across the board, I mean, if I were a commissioner, I'd be hard pressed to put that in place. Now, personally, do I care if we have mansions anywhere in the county? No, but I don't know that that's a fair avenue to go down. And it seems strange to me that would be a preferred route than what we have on the table right now.
I was just going to pretty much echo the same thing. You know, that's a much more restrictive approach than focusing in on rural remote properties with the thought that this designing a use that is more harmonious to the surrounding public land. But again, I think there would be a lot more pushback from the public, and there would be the risk of it. I feel like a taking on properties that are accessible and you know, easy to put well and septic on, and it's never easy, but much more obtainable for those kind of properties. So I think I just would echo those comments. I think that would be a much greater impact, and I think we would be, putting a lot on the board to, you know, do that kind of blanket restriction. I think it'd be more restrictive than what the goal would be.
I'm looking at our zoning map right now, and there's quite a lot of ag forestry land that is easily accessible. And we have chosen our zone districts, our backcountry zone districts, to truly be rural and remote. And I think that what we're trying to do here is to keep our rural and remote areas to be just that. I don't know that we really want to apply that to all of our ag forestry. And I think that this is probably a topic for us to discuss, not here, but more in an environment amongst us where we are actually focusing on the backcountry zone district. Right now, I think we're just sort of trying to figure out whether we can focus on the backcountry zone district.
Yeah, I agree. I was just going to say, I mean, I think that questionnaire that we kind of went through. We can send that out again to everybody and kind of get feedback as to what people's thoughts are, concerns are, and happy to bring that up. But I guess I would like to gauge from the commissioners and staff and things like that if we are okay for that to take up one of these work sessions that's on one of our next 2 work sessions. I guess it would be my suggestion that our next work session is that questionnaire and discussion so that we can pull out of that, do we move forward with this or not? I really like Anne's idea of putting together the workflow so that we understand what work would have to go into it to finish it, so that everybody can kind of understand if there are pieces that can be picked up, or kind of what the ask of staff is on that, because I know they're super busy heading into this time of year. So what are people's thoughts on that being kind of our agenda for the next work session meeting at the end of April?
Let's do that.
Tritz is for it.
Okay, thank you. I have a thumbs up from Kayla. Do either of our other 2 commissioners have a, does that sound workable?
Yeah, that sounds good. And I'll review that and give more detail and feedback as well.
Awesome. Okay, let's.
Thanks for letting me play devil's advocate there. That was a good. I did that. The access issue is actually, that's the point that I needed to work through that in my mind. So that's great. The difference between those zone districts.
Well, and Bryce, I really liked that you pointed out again, we are also allowing development that we didn't initially in these areas. And that was something like people do want to do smaller cabins and yurts, and that actually opens up development to a lot of people as well. And that was something that kind of in my little comments, I kind of steered away from. So I liked that you brought us back to that idea of it as well.
I think it's just a balance of both, I think. And that's work out what the why is really for backcountry.
Cool. Well, I'll get that sent out to everybody, or I'll send it to Anne maybe, and Anne can send it out. And then that way, if anybody can't make it, or I mean, I don't know what the thoughts are. We can also allow, some public input on those little questionnaires. I'm happy to send them out, get some people's, feedback on them as well for other things that maybe we're not thinking of, or ideas that we maybe aren't thinking of, and get those sent back. And then we can just kind of put them all together for the next meeting on the 26th, if that works for everybody. All right, cool. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Or unless anybody has anything else they want to talk about, do I have any other members of the public that are here for anything that we didn't talk about? Okay.
Heather, this I think Jamie and Amy both wanted a copy of that form. So I have Jamie's email address if you don't have it, and I can help forward that to him. If you will resend that to me, please.
Perfect. Yep. And I think, yeah, we can just let Anne, I think Anne has everybody's on there. So we'll have her distribute it to everybody that was here this evening. And then if there's anybody else, just forward those email addresses to Anne, and I'll make sure, she'll make sure she gets them out. That way, if anybody responds, they can send them to staff rather than one of us. I think that seems more appropriate. Okay. Any other questions, or anybody want to chat about anything, or do they just want to do a motion to adjourn?
To adjourn.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you for participating tonight, guys. Have a good night.
Night.
Night.